On today's show, we're joined by Drew Rosner and Jothan Frakes. Jothan is one of the most experienced individuals in both policy and boardroom side of things in the domain industry, and also the technical aspects. You name a company or an industry in its hottest years, Jothan was there getting things done. Today, we discuss blockchain, domain protection services like WilyFish, crypto, digitalization, policy, and at the very end, we do a screen share with Jothan's ratio of time to splain domain versus value. Enjoy the show. Media Options is the industry-leading domain broker specializing in domain acquisitions, high-value domain sales, and domain name consultation. As pioneers and thought leaders on the subject of the domain aftermarket and domain name value, plus through their clear domain acquisition service, Media Options offers startups and established corporations an unparalleled scope of high-value domain options, providing access to domain names and curation technologies not available elsewhere. Media Options believes in the power of a great domain name and is dedicated to helping you obtain yours. Call or email today to put a domain to work for you.
FD was built by domain investors to increase your inquiries, sales, and profit. Forget spreadsheets and archived emails. Manage your entire investment portfolio in one place using a secure and completely confidential platform. Learn more at ft.com. That's EFTY. ft.com.
Hey, Sherpa Network. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Tess Diaz, executive producer of DomainSherpa.com, and today we are bringing you a longtime listener, first-time caller. First, let's introduce Andrew Rosner, CEO of Media Options, the domain brokerage firm. Hi, Andrew. How you doing today?
I am excellent. Very glad to be here.
Delighted to hear. And I'm really, really excited to introduce Jothan Frakes. Jothan, you are always behind the scenes. You have been in the internet since the 90s, but you really have a very low profile. And to our audience, we've given Jothan quite the pep talk that we are demanding some flexing.
Let me try. Hey, thank you for having me on, Tess and Drew. This is really a privilege. I appreciate it a lot. I just really have been excited about what you've done with Sherpa and spreading the word, and very aligned with my thinking. You know, I've spent a long career promoting domain names and really backing the platform. Domains are like the coolest thing ever, and it's kind of a legacy to be able to talk with my kids' schools and teachers and say, hey, I was around when there was only, COM and .net and org, and now there's all this other stuff. And it's really, kind of grown quite a lot. I mean, when I started with domains was 91. And I mean, you could count the COMs, I think it was 3 digits.
Yeah,
no, sorry, 6 digits.
92 is when it got over 1,000.
Yeah.
How did you come to be involved? How did you come to be involved in the domain space early?
Hold on. I just want to touch on the early domain days. I was not present, but I am probably the only person that treats domains in some way like an antique, like a collectible. And so I think I have the claim to fame of being the only person with a domain name registered from every single year except 85, when, because you only have symbolics. So we've got an 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, all the way up to the present day. And I think I'm the only person in the world that has that, a portfolio of every single year. And the oldest one is ksr.com, 88, no, 87.
Wow.
86.
Were you born yet?
Number 99. Yes, I was born.
Okay.
I was born.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. So if you want to name, there's a domain name. It's nordu.net, nordu.net, that came before symbolics. And in fact, there was a time when they just lumped everything into I think they were tracking it in Excel at Network Solutions, and they upgraded to like Microsoft Access. And you know, when you start to get into tens of thousands of domains as it starts to like ramp up, then you're storing it in, you know, real robust database systems.
Yeah.
And you know, VeriSign, now operating CommonNet, have built, you know, just the most massive resilient system. They were just celebrating like 20 years of uptime, like
Yeah.
100% uptime, which is really
remarkable.
Really, it's such a gold standard. And
Totally.
you know, it's amazing to think of all the commerce and everything that's been built on domain names.
Well, imagine, you know, it just goes to show what human ingenuity is capable of, given the proper incentive. And, you know, there's nothing like a monopoly contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars to, and I don't say that in a derogatory way in any way whatsoever.
No, I think you're right.
On the other side of the fence, I support VeriSign, and I think it's so silly that anybody believes that that contract would ever be given to anybody else, because 20 years of uptime, it's like, you know, oh, people crying over their domain price going from $8 to $8 whatever, right? And then versus 20 years of uptime, like, oh, let me see if I can save you 7% annual increase in your thing, or, oh wait, 20 years of uptime. You know, it's like downside never outweighs the upside. So always outweighs.
Let's take it a different angle too. So, I mean, think about, you know, in the early days, this caught on because people have trouble, hell, with phone numbers, right? I mean, remember, like, I'm not old enough to remember this, but I talk with people, they remember 5-digit phone numbers. And, you know, folks would have to say like Quincy 493 or something like that. And that they would use letters to kind of help with a mnemonic way to remember, and, you know, so they could dial their friends and stuff. Then you got into 7-digit numbers, and then you got into, you know, like adding area codes, and you've got these 10-digit numbers, you know, and phones became smart where you could have something that would speed dial for you. So you just remember, oh, you just press this button and you can call your relatives. And IP addresses are way more complex than the, you know, telephone numbers, right? That's IPv4. Now there's IPv6 because we've run out of IPv4, which are super complex. I mean, domains make it easier to connect, right?
Yes.
Or to be found. And that's what it's all about, is connecting and communicating and making it easy. So I go back, yes, of course, you know, there's all that and what VeriSign's done. But if you think in terms of the success and why people have registered so many domain names, it's because they're so powerful in their utility and benefit to people. We have technology like the Zoom that we're on right now and things like that so people can stay connected. But people are like doing digitalization at gunpoint with their jobs. They're taking projects that have been deferred. Sometimes people are laid off and they're just like, okay, screw it. I'm going to launch my blog now, or I'm going to work my passion, and I'm going to go get the right domain name. And so we've got domains have been accruing in value and interest as a result of all this, because of all the utility they deliver, all the ability that they give you to connect with people. And in a time like this, it's I mean, I'm grateful that that's happening, because it's in an industry that I'm really passionate about, but it's also able to give people that value and utility for, you know, $10 a year or $30 a year or whatever you pay. People are actually going out and spending the right amount of money, though. They're like, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do it with the right name. I'm not going to go out and get like, you know, 50pickles.com or make up some, you know, like, that's probably going to be registered within about 5 minutes of this broadcast.
I guarantee you it's already registered.
It could be. It could be. The benefit of this, though, is so amazing. And I've always loved domains because we're just scratching the surface of what you can do with it. I mean, it's a globally distributed network of ability, and it's inside of a domain name. And we're using it for like websites and email and these little sort of dinky little uses. But you can put in geographic locations, and you can put in signatures and identity and authentication into these. There's just
wallets.
Oh, yeah.
This is a great point, Jothan, to establish your credibility as our audience listens.
Sure.
You have one of the most unique and expansive histories in this industry I love earlier today, you said you're super technical, but you also speak boardroom.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
Let's go through. So how did you get involved in the internet in the 90s?
Well, I was, IT guy. I was an IT guy at this company that made sound cards in this, Silicon Valley,
Mm-hmm.
and we had an email gateway between our Microsoft mail and the internet. And we had a bulletin board system where people could download drivers for their sound cards and stuff. It wasn't like it is now today. You'd buy these expansion things so you could even have sound in your computer, and CD-ROMs. And so people would need to download the drivers. They'd need them to work with their CD-ROM games and things like that. And this was a really convenient place to set up an FTP site to download drivers. Otherwise, people were connecting with modems and things. So it was really like early on, and or sort of right at the horizon of when the like hypertext was starting to let you assemble pages, and then the Mosaic browser came out, and you started to get into where you could do more with better user interfaces, make it easier for people to connect with their information. And I was hooked. I was like, this is great. I can go find out information about anything. I can go visit all these different universities and all these different resources. I can communicate with people on the other side of the world. This is just.
Is that the extent of the vision you had at that time?
Yeah, I'm pretty basic. No, I
liar.
No, you could see it was going places. I mean, at the time, there were all these disparate. There was AOL and there was CompuServe and all these different services, but you literally had to go and connect to each of them individually. And I thought, like, I've got this person over here who's on this network, this person over here on this network, and you still can't interconnect and talk and communicate. So I always knew that there would be more ability to cross those networks and be able to talk with each other, to be able to connect with people and do more. We started to see where stores became more and more. At the time I'm talking about, really, it wasn't a commercial internet. In fact, it was almost frowned on to do commerce. It was more, informational, maybe less .commerce and more .communist. It's a bad joke, but it's just a little bit more academic and more tech, more a different place. And I worked with a gent who got. We were working on security services for pay-per-view video. I'll just say it that way. So I was writing programs that would go charge a credit card and would open up a port in a Cisco router so that somebody's video client could then, get through and it would check every minute. And if you weren't paid up, then boom, you're gone.
Yeah.
And so there was all kinds of technology driving that. One of the gents I worked with there got the delegation for a country code back in '97, and I became a registry guy immediately. So started as
was that
CTO.
Brian Cartmel by any chance?
Yes, it was actually.
And what registry was it? What CCTLD?
It was .cc. It was the Cocos Keeling Islands, and.
I
didn't know that you know Brian. I didn't know that you know Brian.
I know Brian, or I knew Brian, only because I helped him sell a domain name when I first started Media Options as a domain brokerage. And
was this authorized.com or?
Yeah. And he called me one day, right, and he says this was it was October 2014. October 2010. Sorry, October 2010. Brian Cartmel calls me. He says, "Look, man, you got to buy this thing called Bitcoin." And I was like, "Bitcoin? What's Bitcoin?" And he starts telling me about Bitcoin. And he's like, it was way over my head. I am the least technical technologist on the planet, and so he's telling me about Bitcoin. I'm like, all right, whatever. You're like, you clearly know what you're talking about. By the way, Brian is one of the smartest people I've ever met. telling me all this stuff. And I'm like, all right, you clearly know what you're talking about. I'm willing to do it. I just have I don't understand what you're talking about, but I'll do it because I like to take a shot on people that, are smarter than me. And so, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And it was really complicated at that time. And it took me like 2 more years before I actually bought any. But Brian Cartmel was the first person who ever told me about Bitcoin, whoever mentioned the word Bitcoin to me and put it on my radar.
Yep. Well, and he's the person, when I talk about my friend who got me, he's like, it's $1,000th of a dollar or 1,000th of a penny, get a few of these, it's 100th of a penny, get a few of these. It's 10th of a penny, get a few of these, every denomination of
12 cents, 12 cents when he told me about it. It was 12 cents.
Yes. And I just kicked myself. I remember thinking, this won't ever take off. This won't fly. How could I possibly, the banks will get in the way of this. The government won't like this. And then, boy, was I wrong. But so Brian pulled me in. He got the delegation. He was working with the person who got the delegation for the country code for the Cocos Keeling Islands, was .cc. And we were like, all right, let's have some fun. And we set it up and started competing. We immediately pumped the numbers up to like a couple million. People were thirsty for options, and there weren't a lot of options out there. WS hadn't launched. I think .to had launched. Tonga had launched, like 97, 98. And many of the CCTLDs were out there, but they were still very closed off. This one was liberalized at the second level and just, widely available. And, before we knew it, we had hundreds of thousands of registrations and, growing this company up. And we built it clear up until about 2000 when we sold it to VeriSign. And then I ended up going to work for VeriSign for about 3-4 years.
How many employees were there in the .cc registry project, and were you involved in selling it to VeriSign, or you
25 and yes? Yeah, 25 and yes.
Okay, I mean, this just nobody was negotiating with VeriSign in these years. I mean, this is incredible. You have a very storied history. So
well,
then
it was kind of network solutions in VeriSign still, because it was was all still playing out.
Opaque.
Yeah. I mean, ICANN had just formed, so we were going to Marina Del Rey to these ICANN meetings, and they were still trying to figure out multiple registrars, and I mean, this is before anything was really split up, and it was quite a different time. I mean, you had like the kind of concept around buying a domain was like, I'll buy a com, I'll buy a net. If the com's not taken, okay, I'll get an org if neither of those are available. And we were like the next brand. So it was like, Pepsi, Coke, RC, and we were like, Mr. Pibb. It was like the extra flavor.
My boss in the seafood business used to say there's a lot of money to be made in the gutter.
Well, I mean, we were actually doing something pretty awesome. So we actually built this technology. This is how brilliant, Brian was. We came up with, I told you I'm technical. So in DNS, you can do all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that they do is they've got it built so flexible. Paul Macapetros was just, brilliant in setting all this up. So it'll go through and you can put a wildcard at the end of your entries in your
DNS
records, and it'll be like, okay, you didn't find anything else, okay, then just do this. And so we did that with .cc, and we built that out so that we noticed in the DNS servers that we'd see all this gibberish and stuff coming through, and people wanted to use IDN. People were typing in domains and using keyboards other than our QWERTY keyboards. There were people trying to do stuff in different languages. And so we figured out how to kind of collapse all that together in the early days of IDN, and without having to plug in any helpers or things like that, let people do domains in like Hebrew and Arabic and Chinese and Japanese. So we did all these patents. We did a patent where we could direct domains, like we would block off all the numeric and hyphen domains, and we would direct people, like we'd detect it if it was looked like an ISBN number for a book, we would forward it to that page on Amazon. If it was like if it looked like a tracking number for FedEx, we'd shoot it over to FedEx. So you could just type in your domain.cc. If it's a FedEx tracking number, just pop you right to the right page at FedEx. You don't have to navigate around. It was just an immediate pointer into that. And we would explore things like downloading the alert database, which is all the phone switching records. We could track it down to what switch you were on, to what telco, and we would get you right to the page so you could send an SMS to somebody's phone. So we patented all this stuff, and and then VeriSign bought us, and
those patents went into the basement and never got
but
taken.
You can still, I mean, VeriSign's, they still have these patents. They still have these patents. So you can look up Brian and I as inventors on a number of VeriSign's patents. So VeriSign started SiteFinder. Well, I guess, I say it's like I'm the guy at Pfizer who invented the heart medication, and the guys in marketing figured out it's for more than just, your ticker. Yeah. And so, here's all this advertising, and it gets shut down really quick, and it put these prohibitions into wildcards and domains now. So, but if you look up the SiteFinder patent, you'll see Brian's and my name among a few other inventors. And so that's early evil genius stuff. So I worked at VeriSign, though. They bought TV around the same time as CC. I worked to help them get that kind of into their sort of centralized platform. And
just for anyone listening, so they bought .tv, which we all associate with television, but it's actually for some random country. Every country in the world got assigned their own, like the United States got .us, Canada .ca, and some random island, Tuvalu, got .tv. So you have the .cc experience, and now VeriSign is purchasing a different country CCTLD, but it's a super useful, applicable one and very specific. So back to you, Jothan.
So I helped move CC and TV into VeriSign, and then stuck around till about 2004 or so. And at that point, I was like, okay, this was all cool. What do I do next? And I got a hold of Jay Westerdahl over at Name Intelligence Domain Tools, and we had done at ENIC, we'd done some name suggestion, name spinner stuff. So we had some other patents around name suggestion. And Jay had a name suggestion tool, totally different approach. I started working with him on that and getting some of the Whois stuff working and connecting up with people, managing multiple registrars there. And we decided to start the Domain Roundtable, a new conference in the domain space. Jay had just gone to traffic, and he was, high on the excitement of, getting people together on domains. And I love the academic side of it. I was more like, let's get all these different registry people you meet at ICANN, and let's get all these other opportunity streams. Let's make it more widely available to people that they're not going to get exposed to typically. Let's mash these different crowds up, get the intellectual property attorneys in here, have them talk with the, the registries, and have the registrars talk with the registrants and people who are investing, and just get the afternicks and the SATOs and everybody together. And so we did that for a couple years. I got hired by Oversee.net, who run, they ran a huge parking company called Domain Sponsor. And then we launched a conference called Domain
Who was
Fest.
Basically the backbone of this sort of domain investor community, because they, ran the conferences, they were the big sponsors, they were the ones throwing the parties, and they were the source of most of the people in the industry's, passive income.
I mean, you could back then make money on parking and pay-per-click. I mean,
a lot of it.
There were people making very, very large amounts of money on pay-per-click.
Yeah, and I met you in 2006 when you were running the roundtable, and it was phenomenal to see someone in the industry, really, you've always been a great connector and collaborator, and seen the need for community. Even, no one knew that cash parking was going to change so much. Actually, I'm curious, did you know? Or have any inkling? No.
I mean, it was going to naturally optimize, right? I mean, you inevitably will see optimization happen in every single business.
But I don't think that the domain community, from my perspective, speaking to so many investors back then, I don't think it would have survived or retained as many people if it hadn't been for your conferences. Because then once they hit problems and these huge financial changes, you had really laid a foundation to prepare for that. So just hats off to you. Okay, so
thank you.
Next.
Thank you.
What'd you do next?
Well, so we ended up buying snap names and moniker. And I was helping them kind of find their sea legs inside of the ICANN space. With snap names and moniker, that introduced the live auctions and that concept. So I was I can't take credit for Domain Fest or any of these. I mean, I was part of a team of people, right? I mean, there was some really amazing people.
Moniker was Monty, and the live auction thing was mostly Monty, and then but you were there, and that's the perspective.
Actually, interestingly enough, the live auction thing was not Monty. The live auction thing, it was pre-Monty. We actually got snap names live all set up. And then when we pulled in moniker, I mean, Monty is just such a natural, charismatic, charming person.
Promoter.
He immediately steps right up there, and he's there side by side with Wayne. If you look at old videos of stuff, you'll see me. I'm clerk at a lot of those auctions. Like we were building that technology out as we would go in order to work with the SnapName platform.
So that was fun. So first of all, I kind of feel like you were at every time at the hottest company or place in each era. So Oversea was it in those years. And you just kind of mentioned in passing the auctions. What was your role in developing the back end, or tell me more about you and the auctions?
Sure. So there, I helped with, I guess, inventory acquisition, and then we would troubleshoot and prototype. And they needed somebody who could really quickly on the fly clerk the auctions and keep track of, it was like build as you fly kind of stuff with the live auction. Like we'd literally get this platform going, and we'd need to be able to do stuff on the fly. So I'm technical. I was able to kind of help along with the team of people that were working on the live auction.
Interesting.
But I knew a lot of the domain investors, and I'd be like, hey, we're having this auction. If you'd like to place some inventory, here's how to do this. The thing that messed me up with is when I appraise or estimate domains, I'm usually like appraising for, if you were to put it into auction, what is a good reserve price versus maybe like the wholesale price or even the net price. Yeah. So what's the depth in the water your hook goes to get the fish, right? And that's. And I came up with some unpopular ideas. One of the things that I always wanted to do was to bring in Michael Winslow from Police Academy, like the sound effects guy. And like when people would bid, be like, have him make a sound effect when somebody's bidding, or if they get up to leave the room, have him mess with them, or like make it fun and entertaining. And my ideas were not always the best, right? I mean, really, they wanted to project a very professional veneer to that, and so that doesn't.
Which I get. I do believe that like the pomp and circumstance, the flash is not necessary unless you're compensating for a lack of sincere interest, right? Or sincere incentive or sincere value, right? You got to or you're just there's so much to go around that it's like let's throw some flash on top, but.
Well, so I'll fast forward on the stuff.
To step into you at Snap Domains, which was the place to go for expired domains. I have a question. When did expired domain, like I entered the industry in 06 and expired domain auctions were a thing and Snap was all I knew, or at the very beginning. When did they actually begin? Who set up the first ones?
Snap names started early. I mean, that was Ray King. Even before that, it was Michael Arrington.
With Pool, Michael Arrington had the pool.com.
Yeah,
and then,
there was pool.com.
And then Howard Whiting was doing but it wasn't really an auction. He had set prices, and he was basically the one catching all the names for Frank and for Gary and for basically everybody. Kevin. Well, Kevin I think was doing most of his own.
So Jothan, is it fair to say that within the first year of expired domain auctions existing, you were involved in the heart of creating that?
No. I mean, the drop catching had started and was really becoming a thing even in 2003 into 2004.
Okay.
And I really got into the conferences and everything else about 2006. So it had actually matured for a couple of years.
Okay.
We had a robust aftermarket interest in the .cc's though, when we were at the, back before VeriSign acquired, there was a lot of interest in .cc names. And obviously .tv had a premium pricing model, not just for initial registration, but in renewals.
Yeah.
And that is actually, it's so amazing. Things go out of style and come back into style, and that's come back. I don't know how I feel about it, but it's come back. And so there's a variety of ways that people will monetize stuff. The snap names and the pools and the different drop catching technologies that are out there. I mean, the people who are dominating right now are Namebright and Dropcatch. It's literally the way it's set up is registrars. It's almost like buying lottery tickets or betting on horses. It's the more horses you put in the race, the more likely you'll win.
The more likely you are to win.
And everything is supposed to be equal, so you just buy more equals, and then you're not equal anymore. So
it's like a co-op. You got a co-op, and it's just, I bought out all the other cooperative.
I want to get to the meat of our conversation, even though I know we pressured you to really dig in here, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure.
So this established for our audience who doesn't know you. I mean, you've been here since the beginning. In addition, moniker, ICANN, VeriSign, Minds and Machines. I mean, there's nowhere you haven't worked.
Sure.
I'm sure I'm missing a handful. You co-founded NamesCon.
Sure, I co-founded NamesCon. Well, I had worked with KPMG on evaluating the new top-level domains. I had to drop my industry profile to remain, unconflicted and stay out of touch with anybody. So I did a lot of the evaluation technology review with the great team at KPMG, some of the best and brightest. And then as that concluded, as the new TLDs had been evaluated and they're starting to come out, I was like, I got to do something to reestablish my industry profile after being in the bunker for 3 years. So what do I do? And interestingly enough, DomainFest hadn't materialized, and I get a call from somebody I just love and respect, Richard Lau. He's like, hey, I usually do my Water Night fundraisers. Where's this conference at? And I'm like, I don't know. It's not seeming to materialize. He's like, well, I'm thinking of getting some people together in Las Vegas. We're going to go and, maybe 100 people around a pool. And I was like, oh, Richard, no. You're thinking too small. Let's go big. And we got Jody Chamberlain, who is like the conference goddess. We got together and we started NamesCon. And it just really was the planets lined up. The new TLDs were coming out.
Timing was perfect.
It was, it was perfect. And so that we ran that until about 2016. I was like, okay, what do? I bought a registrar with some of the proceeds. And so I've been running a registrar myself since then. I started a conference called Merge.
What's your registrar?
My registrar is called Plisk, Plisk. It's a horrible name, but it's easy to pronounce. Single.
But it's been around for a long time, actually.
It's been around for a long time. I bought it from a gent by the name of Paul Goldstone, who people will remember from My Gold Rush, and just a fantastic guy. You know, he had this extra one. He's amazing, yeah. And so I run that, and you know, started a conference called Merge. I got tapped to be the executive director of the Domain Name Association, which had started up to really like promote just domains in general. You know, that was fantastic, because here I am so excited and passionate about domains. I'm like, yes, you know.
Who are the constituents? Who for DNA? What was the what was the impetus? Who was the driving forces there?
Well, you know, initially, I mean, it was, gosh, you know, GoDaddy and GoDaddy. Well, it was Right Side Donuts, Google, Amazon. I mean, all the biggies that were like launching TLDs. Minds and Machines is in there. Affiliates, New Star, all the companies that were, you know, working on launching and harmonizing. It was like, how do we help people understand that domains can do so much more? There's more out here. You know, help people understand what's going on. And you know, lots of CCTLDs. Nominet was involved. SIDN, some of the major CCTLDs were involved. It was about promoting domains. You know, the biggest challenge is not just, you know, having a focus on .com or, you know, the new TLDs and getting caught up in that, you know, religious war. Yeah, it's more like, you know, domains are freaking amazing, enabling technologies as digital assets. Get them out of the plumbing, you know, and help people understand how important they are. Yes. When you go to a hotel, you expect that there's going to be electricity, and you notice when the electricity's out, but otherwise you just kind of expect that it's there working. And domains are like that. You know, people focus on their website or their email, and they get really bent out of shape when it's broken. But after they set it up, it's kind of,
you know, arguably until consumer tech really, you know, hit the road, right? Like when the pavement, you know, when the rubber really hit the road with consumer tech, direct to consumer, you know, where people were engaging regularly, not necessarily through an app, but maybe it's Amazon.com, maybe it's, you know, any of the other big name, beautiful domain names that have been sort of utilized. You know, I think that was sort of the beginning of sort of the criticality of these domains seeping into the mainstream.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you.
So then, you know, we fast forward to today. You are joining us. You've been awake since midnight on an 8-hour call with ICANN. I mean, you're just in the room where it happens every time. So at the ICANN meeting today, you mentioned that, you know, with COVID, there's a lot of talk about digitalization, industries that are online are booming. Let's talk about that and what you're hearing, the buzz about all that right now first.
Well, people are really, you know, digitalizing at gunpoint. There's a, you know, mad adoption. One of the things that also happens is old vectors, you know, problems and bad actors, people, there's malware and all the same kind of crap spam emails you get, click this link and, you know, your computer is suddenly gone or whatever. So there's always like the bad stuff with the good stuff. And there's a narrative out there that is about DNS abuse to kind of, you know, look, there's, when the domain industry goes and registers domains for customers, there's always some certain percentage of bad actors who, you know, sneak into the mix and do dumb stuff or bad stuff. And so there's tons of registries and registrars that are working really hard to make sure that, you know, let's keep that from happening. Let's do what we can But there's always a fight. Like if I'm a registry or registrar, I'm like the power company, right?
Yeah, you don't want to be the arbiter.
Yeah, so if my neighbor's cranking music too loud, I don't go and shut the power grid down, right? You know, you go knock on the door, you try to solve it at the lowest level. And so it's kind of like this, there's content that gets hosted on websites and stuff like that. And then there's the domains that point at it, right? And people keep trying to draw domains and registries and registrars into solving the problems with the content that ultimately is hosted somewhere.
Yeah,
so it's
I think interestingly, the antitrust stuff that's happening with Google right now and the pressure on sort of slicing out Chrome browser, I think is going to bring this conversation about DNS abuse to a head, because I think from my perspective, which is far less informed than yours, I feel like that should all just be addressed at the browser level, because it's like, you know, you got 5 browsers that really matter, that make up 93% of your whole, you know, ecosystem. And then, you know, so let's say you have to deal with 100 parties, right? Well, it's a lot easier to gain consensus among, you know, and it's not 100 parties, let's say it's 10, right? It's a lot easier to gain consensus or enforce rulings at that layer, at the layer that it directly engages. You know, it's the ultimate gatekeeper between the people that want something and the people that are trying to deliver something on the internet. And so I feel like that's where that problem should lie, is with the browser. You know, resolve it or don't resolve it. But I think it's, you're trying, you know, there's a leak in the bedroom, don't rip out all the pipes.
Yeah. You don't have to have a kill everyone like God sort of attitude about, you know, problems. Solve it at the lowest possible level. Be elegant about it, right? I mean, if I shut off the whole grid, you see what happens when you shut off the grid in, what's the movie Die Hard, you know, Nakatomi Plaza? You shut off the power grid. The bad guys want you to shut off the power grid, because then they can open the safe. You know, you don't do that. You try to solve it at the lowest possible level. Anyway, ICANN stuff is all about that. They're talking about the next rounds of when more top level domains might be signed up.
What's that?
Well, it's always going to be 2 years from when you ask me right now until it's, you know, it's on a sliding scale.
Until it's go time.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to work out. There's a lot of forces that are for, a lot of forces that are against. There's biases. There's look, they learned a lot when they did it the last time in 2012. And, you know, there's a lot that's been learned in the process, and there's a lot that's different. There was, you know, the creation of all kinds of systems to support it. A whole group was developed inside of ICANN to support all of this. And now that exists where it didn't. And so the process is going to be really different. People have learned a lot. So what's interesting, you know, to touch back maybe on blockchain stuff, right? You know, folks have been setting up all kinds of different namespaces in and around blockchain, you know, kind of frustrated with the pace of
innovation.
The pace. Well, I mean, ICANN delivers a very, very valuable stability and resilience and reliance and trust
100%.
on domains working. And
absolutely.
People still, you know, if you're a developer, you don't really engage with ICANN too much. You have your domain and you kind of do your thing, right? It's like the plumbing stuff. You don't worry about that. But there's these new technologies that keep coming out. There's one called Handshake that they've got their own kind of root with some software that coexists with the ICANN stuff.
And I'm going to interrupt again, Jothan. Just for anyone who's listening, to highlight this moment, this is handshake.io, which Mike Carson came on the show.
I think it's handshake.org, actually.
Oh,
so there's two things. There's handshake.org, which is the overall project. And then Namebase is kind of like the GoDaddy, for lack of a better term, that you can go interact with it. They're the only real big commercial registrar, and they've done a good job to do the NASA NASCAR bridge between the complex stuff and the, I can do this. And I'm only used to left turns. How am I going to make this work? Okay, click.
And so if someone is listening and is piqued by this, there's a June 15th Domain Sherpa with Mike Carson, and we have another one coming out with Steve Webb. I'm not quite sure what date that's going to be released, but just saying that for a bigger picture. Now, where were you at? What were you saying?
Oh, well, so, you know, in my role, I'm no longer the exec director of the Domain Name Association, but I always track the ways that people are innovating in domains. I still stand by that we're just at the start of the innovation potential that
the use cases.
Oh yeah, you can tap so much more out of a domain name. And you're starting to see that with blockchain wallet addresses. I think you touched on that, and I think that's an important thing to think of. Blockchain addresses are really long and complex, and there's a big consequence to messing those up. If you're sending money to a wallet or transmitting something to a wallet or agreeing to some contract, if you make a typo, a lot of times that's gone. Like it's
gone.
You know, that one way.
Irreparable. The
car went off the cliff. Thelma and Louise, that was the wrong cliff.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
and if you're dealing with big enough numbers, suddenly, you know, oh wow, well, if we had a couple less characters in our domain name, that would have been awfully nice.
Yeah. Well, so the wallets are a great way that you can leverage domain names and point them at wallet space. And there's people developing out the software, like Unstoppable Domains have done a really good job. I think they support like 40 different cryptos. I haven't really embraced that one as much. I've embraced Handshake a bit more just because it works a little bit more with DNS. Yeah. And then there's the ENS domains.
Exactly. So they really kind of built their own route, right? And you know, Unstoppable Domains, you know, there's a little bit of both of these things. You know, the whole concept of a decentralized DNS is very fascinating to me, because as you know, I wear many hats, but as one of those hats is a domain investor. We have a portfolio of thousands of very valuable domain names that I've spent a lot of money buying and acquiring and maintaining and marketing and all that stuff, right? And commercializing. And so I have a very strong vested interest in understanding what does that future of domain names look like and what are the threat vectors. And so I want to play with all of these new, you know, shiny toys. And so I've been playing with them as well. And I look at Handshake, and I think I mentioned offline before that, you know, the anarchist in me loves the fact that they're just saying, all right, open the floodgates. We're going to let everything out, and we're going to let people figure it out. And you know, and I there's an appeal to that, and there's also a force to that, but there's also implications to that down the line when we get into some name collisions that we're going to have to see how it works out. The Unstoppable model, what I like there is that they're looking further down the road and saying, well, we actually just want to create a sort of registry architecture that is going to ultimately be fully decentralized and will allow the legacy route without conflict to merge in, right? Or you know, upgrade, if you will, somewhere down the line after all the red tape has been cut through, if it ever is, right? And I like that model for a variety of reasons, just because one, you know, I think Handshake promotes way more innovation, right? It's like, get this thing out to market, let people play with it, break it. You know, we're going to see people do all kinds of crazy stuff. It's going to be really interesting across a bunch of different fields. You know, it's going to set precedents in legal, tech, you know, content, you know, distribution, a lot of different stuff that's going to come out of that. But it's going to hit some walls along the way. Whereas Unstoppable, it's like, okay, you know, I don't know if ICANN ever says, yes, we're going to, like, you know, dissolve ourselves, you know, dissolve the need of ourselves and say, we're going to put this all decentralized. It's hard to believe. Somewhere in the middle is probably the truth. But it is hard, you know, as an optimist, and then I'm going to hand this off to you, but like, I'm optimistic because I look at this landscape and I understand, despite not being that technical, I understand the implications of a decentralized architecture. And I think that that's amazing. I think that is a better place to be. I think that's a safer place to be. I think that protects the value of the name space forever. It makes that value permanent. You know, in the same way as Bitcoin is, right? Price might fluctuate, but the value of the namespace, the value of the utility is permanent. It will never go away. So I like that future. I don't know how it ever gets there. You are, you know, beautifully straddled on both sides of that. What do you think? What do you think we ever get there? Do you think that the legacy route today ever upgrades into a decentralized way? Not necessarily with either of these two options, just, you know, how does that transfer of power work?
Great. It's a great question, right? And it's a, you know, it's a futurist question. I think we'll see that happen, but I think we're going to see more benefits of certain centralization aspects and decentralization of technology. Like we might see centralized policy, but decentralized technology, or vice versa. It's going to be different layers that happens on. Like with DNS now today, we've got what is it, 13 root servers, but they're spread across thousands of instances. Yeah. And the technology itself finds the closest ones. You could theoretically say it's at least distributed, but might be on its way to being somewhat decentralized. Other than that, each zone needs to be at some point, you know, centrally located. So I don't sell two digital assets of the same name to two different parties. That's a bad experience.
Although I actually think that's one of the use cases going forward, is like, you know, you start slicing these things up into you know, putting geofences around them. It's like the guy in Chicago might see something completely different at attorney.com than the guy in New York and the guy in Hong Kong and the guy in, you know, Okinawa.
That's the source, not only geo, but you know, if you look at one of the biggest places of friction that occur is between the trademark system and domains, because, you know, it's not like you set your browser into airplane mode and united.com does one thing, and you set up your browser into moving company mode and you type united.com and it goes to United Moving, or some, you know, I could riff on Delta or other things. In trademarks, there's classes of goods and services where you could have one name be entirely, you know, protected in that class or good or services, like Delta Airlines and Delta Faucets, two totally different classes of goods and services. So you could actually start to segment this not just by geography, but also in that type of manner where you're stratifying it in different ways. But
then you just have to understand the intent of the search before you present the content, right? Because you don't want to add another step to somebody. Like if the whole point of the domain is to, you know, create that telepathy, that direct frictionless transfer of an idea, you don't want to say, oh, did you want to get a faucet or did you want to fly to Chicago, right? And then, you know, click one and then we'll take you to the right place, right? So that's somehow that telepathy will probably be monetized into, you know, okay, let's expand the value of this individual namespace by just monetizing the intent better.
Yeah. Well, meanwhile, you know, trademark people can use systems like WilyFish.com or other systems to kind of monitor domains for trademarks and, you know, be cognizant of where their copyright material is at. And that's an important way that people can at least use to protect their brands on a given system that we have now. As we get towards the future system, you know, maybe they'll have multiple brands, or we'll be able to stratify, you know, where people go or how they're doing it. But right now we've got to deal with that.
That's, you know, merging together those two ideas that we just talked about as we sort of segue. But let's imagine for a second that the root zone becomes fully decentralized. And I agree with you, there has to be some degree of centralization because you need to have conflict resolution. And there's just some things that free market economics aren't going to resolve, or at least not resolve for the benefit of the greater good. And so even though I am a hardcore free market capitalist, there just are things which don't apply. And, I think I just read an article, I think it was in Mises this morning, about one of the only justifications for taxes is like, because opting in is sometimes not good enough. And it's like, the original firemen were private. They were, a private fire station, right? And if you didn't pay your stipend to the fire station, they wouldn't come put out fire at your house. And so what they would do is they'd come and make sure that your fire didn't spread to the neighbor's house, but they'd let your house burn because you didn't pay your stipend. And at some point, that's a very effective stick that motivates people to keep paying, but it's not necessarily scalable and controllable. And so, let's just make everybody pay their little, let's make everybody pay a little bit less. And for that, that allows for the development of all these other, resources that create less fires and better tools for stopping them when they do, et cetera, right? So it's for the greater good that everybody sort of just, pays that tax, right? And I think it's applicable to this. Let's imagine for a second a decentralized future, but how does something like a WilyFish help brands protect themselves? How do you enforce your rights as a brand? Because, there's two sides to this. You got all these people saying like ultra libertarian, which that's great. I'm all for it, right? Ultra libertarian, open this thing up. I go live. What I do with it is up to me. And, you don't like it, the browser shouldn't resolve it, period, right? And I hear that argument, and there's something to be said for it. But there's also a lot of cases where that's not okay. And then how do you resolve that, right? And how do you, as a brand, protect your rights, which at the end of the day these are property rights, and these are the basis for free market capitalism is property rights. And so there is two very equal arguments on both sides of this that need to be addressed. And then this governance mechanism is what bridges that. And how can you imagine a way to do that?
Yeah, it's tough to unpack it all, and there's no perfect answer to any of this. But part of what the rationale behind getting all these conferences going and all the things that I've done in my path has been to help untangle it, because once you sit people down and like a domain owner who unintentionally registered a trademark, here's the attorney who's representing that trademark can sit down. They sit down, they have a conversation. The domain owner didn't even know they did this. It's not like, a really like thorny mess. They can just sit down and say, oh, I didn't even know. What do we do to solve this? And they
except that you're ignoring the incentive, right? So
Sure.
The incentive, the parties involved are disincentivized by the system to have that sit down, right? Because it's
not always. I mean, think about this. If you're a corporate attorney, you're working in a company, and that company has 20 different brands. Your job is not domain enforcement. Your job and your salaried job, this is like one thing you have to deal with among your spectrum of other things.
Mm-hmm.
If you sit down with somebody who owns a domain name, have a conversation with them, it's interesting. There's a lot of really emotionally intelligent people in the domain business. It's something, Tess, you're amazing at this. But and you too, Drew. The thing about this is,
I have to push back. I'm not sure that's true, but Tess for sure. I'm not sure I am.
You listen though to the plight of somebody who has to work in enforcing trademarks. And you listen to what their journey is. They play whack-a-mole with all of this different brand enforcement, and it's like a hydra's head. You finally solve one, mm-hmm. and then there's like 5 more pop up, and it's really a bad experience for them. And on the domain owner's side, it's like somebody's coming to take my land. And when those two people can have a conversation and meet eye to eye and at least hear each other and come up with something, it happens more often than not. And it actually, there's some good resolutions that come from that. And
I agree. I've seen it. I've been the arbiter in the middle of that for many
It's a
companies and
spectrum,
brands.
though. I agree with you. It is a
And
spectrum.
that's a small piece of the spectrum, in my experience, because
Can't fault that.
yeah, you know, and it's hard to scale that, but it's the right idea, right? It's the right framework for thinking about what is the framework that is scalable and how to make it, you know, how to bake in the proper incentives where
Mm-hmm.
it, you know, it's not that the lawyers are incentivized to file a UDRP because it's the path of least resistance and it just gets them a fixed fee, and you know they change a few words and you know, and I'm not implying that anybody's not doing their job, because they are. We have incredible domain attorneys, thankfully, and we have incredible, you know, brand protection attorneys, and I'm not trying to imply that either of them are doing anything wrong or negligent. I just think that they're incentivized to follow a certain protocol, and getting outside of that box is actually more costly. And that's what I mean by disincentivized, whether it's time or just headache, or I don't know who's going to be other end of this, and it might be some crazy dude in his mom's basement.
Yeah.
And you know,
so you're saying go for what you know, go for a predictable path rather than the unknown. Yeah.
And I think 9 out of 10 times that's
I'm blessed,
what people
Drew.
do.
I'm blessed. You know, I've met a lot of attorneys who are willing to take that time, and they're the ones spending the time in the ICANN process. So maybe I'm a little bit blessed in that I'm meeting people who are willing to kind of lean in and try to sort out and untangle it without applying a kill everyone let God sort them out approach, right? So, you know, that stuff makes its own gravy. I mean, you know, that's always going to be there. There's systems like WilyFish, or, you know, there's a variety of different products and services to kind of help each side of that equation kind of untangle the contention between trademarks and domains. So going back to these, you know, crypto-based and blockchain-based applications of domains, I think there's some there. You know, I haven't found a technology, maybe ENS domains, maybe a little bit like the wallet factor with Unstoppable. I like the handshake stuff. You're starting to see applications, you know, emerge for it. So it's really early. And there's potentially others, you know. I mean, I've seen them come and go.
So much. We have so many directions we can take this, and so many things that I'd love to talk to you about. But I want to ask you a question about what you were just talking about, because it's something that really intrigues me, and I don't understand the technology behind it at all. And I would love for you to just give me the BioHive view. Why can't I, on my Drew.com, why can't I make Drew.com into my wallet? Why can't that be my wallet today?
Well,
is that technically feasible today?
Sort of. So,
okay.
I mean, you've got the ability to make a text record with your wallet address in it. You may theoretically use DNSSEC so that it's signed and trusted, so you can't have anybody doing any kind of pirate radio broadcast to intervene and send people their wallet.
But then it's basically still, it's a billboard as opposed to a pass-through. I want it to be a pass-through.
So the folks at ENS Domains are actually working on this, where their system coexists with the ICANN domains, whether it's Drew.com or whether it's .art or XYZ or Cred or some of the other TLDs they're working with, like Lux with Minds and Machines. There's a variety of these where they've done it at the TLD level, where it's the varying different software that talk to their system will be able to leverage those records that are wallet records stored in your domain name. If you go to Porkbun or different registrars, they actually let you manage this stuff directly inside of your .lux or .art or XYZ domains. And there's more and more of this. You know, look, registries are trying to innovate. It was the whole philosophy around, you know, the new domains. At innovation where you can get the wallet working on your second level domain, that's going to be I think the magic bullet that really makes, you know, domains that much more valuable and sticky. Right?
I mean, it's like, I said this in a recent interview that we did, that domain names are the last bastion of digital sovereignty.
I agree with you.
I think that is so valuable in and of itself. And I don't think that it's widely understood or recognized. And I think that alone is like, a lights out use case. It's as you said, okay, I got wallet.drew.com and that's my wallet. And, PayPal's not shutting me down. Nobody,
Yep.
Anybody can send me money. Here you go. Drew, wallet.drew.com or however the record is going to work.
Or your social, social.drew.com in the 90s, you would have pointed it at Friendster, and then you could point it at Orkut. Now you can point it at Facebook. And if Facebook goes away,
a permanent place to redirect these people, right?
Yeah. And they're going to your domain. They're not, you're not like, you think about three bands in the early 2000s that one embraced, like MySpace, another set up their own domain name, another one, maybe they went on to, some social media platform that just vanished. The one who had the domain is the one with permanence. Every time one of these platforms, you're betting all in on a platform.
Yeah.
Why not just for an inexpensive investment, even for a band, even if you're, saltine crackers with ketchup budget band, that domain name is that much of a difference to you.
Not just the permanence, but I think it's also lost on people the concept of planting a tree, right? Like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Then you've got a nice, beautiful, mature tree today. Yep. The second best time is today, because the moment you plant the seed, it just starts growing. And it's like, wouldn't it be great if you were a band and you're still out there gigging today? Wouldn't it have been great if you had launched that website in '94 and you've now got a website that has 26 years of history and traffic and stickiness and and Google love, right? And it's like versus over that same period of time, if you were relying on third-party platforms, you've gone through at least 3 iterations of where your band lived and where you connected with your customers, and you had to retrain them all over again, and you had to, it just seems so clumsy. But why is it so? I have my own answer to this question, but like, why is that so intuitive to you and I? And why, the answer to me is what, the question is, why is it so intuitive and clear to you and I? And why is it not intuitive and clear to the greater, society yet? And the answer to my own question is probably something like, because it's just easier or cheaper. And then how do we bridge that gap, right? How do we punch the world in the face, which COVID has helped to do, and say, hey, by the way, stop ignoring, the last bastion of digital sovereignty.
I agree with you. And we see things like Square, we see WordPress, we see these different Squarespace and Wix and Weebly, all these different platforms that make it easier for somebody to get that, get themselves out there and set that up, set up their place. Yes. Email technology is getting easier and easier. G Suite and 365, these platforms where people can activate and manifest and go. Under COVID, it's just been multiplied. I think it went from maybe 8% up to almost 40% of domains getting activated when they get registered. Which is, I mean, we're going to see.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Imagine what that means for the hosting and the email providers and all those services.
And the domain's stickier. I mean, that much more sticky. And when they're activated quickly, it's going to work well. The registries love it because this is the organic use of domains that they really want. And we were talking about bands. I mean, .art did something really fantastic. They're getting into crypto and they're using it for provenance records. And I think that's just, right. I mean, you can go and look up, and see information about that particular exhibit piece,
Yeah.
And that is something in and of itself where you can have
What a
the
great
domain.
experiment, because
Yeah.
that is, I've said this a few times now recently in different conversations about different topics, but domain names are the only bridge currently, until Elon changes that, but they're currently the only bridge between human communication and the digital environment. And so it makes sense that there would be this digital provenance of a physical asset, or some way of traceable, provable scarcity or identification in a digital format that bridges over to a physical asset. That's interesting what you're saying. I haven't heard that with .art. That's
Drew,
great utility.
You seem like really creative. You probably remember I collected vinyl, in high school.
I collected everything. I collected
right.
You name it. Shells, rocks, metal, coins.
Now domain names.
Well, I mean,
names.
So back in the day of vinyl, though, right? You could go and there'd be a special pressing vinyl, and it would have something special about it. Maybe it was pressed on white vinyl or something, and it might have had a signed photograph from the artist. And
I got my original first press Beatles Sgt. Pepper right here. Right.
So in the era of MP3s, though, how do you carry that forward? And the thought of NFTs and ERC 721 or different
original master right here, baby, Sgt. Pepper.
Look at that, right? And so, but record that to an MP3, put it online, and it can be copied billions of times. Where's the specialness, right? You've got it in your hand. How do you replicate that in the digital world? Well, ERC 721 brings that, right? You can have special experiences. Even if you're coupling it with digital music, you could still have a little special recorded message to that person from the artist, or other things you could tie to music. I'm so excited about what could happen, what the potential is with .music when it comes out. And
when we go to Ready Player One society, everybody's going to want all these digital trinkets that are physical, digital manifestations of physical assets, that maybe they own a share of, right? And now, because they own a share, one of the benefits of having a share of that physical asset in its digital manifestation is to be able to use it in this weird digital world that you're going to be operating in.
Now, whenever I start to follow the crypto or the blockchain stuff, people get off in we're off in the universe under a fingernail area. It sounds like we just went to Bong, Pennsylvania, and I think that once we are able to articulate this to people so that they can quickly, have the boardroom conversation where the guys are sitting around and you've got 3 minutes, they're ADD, they're AD, right? They don't even make it to the second D. They're give it to me quick, boy, and you got to rattle it off. I think that physically showing that off.
Where's that bridge? Where does that bridge? How do we create that?
That rainbow bridge is being built, Drew, and it's going to mean different things for different people, right? I think that the technology for domains is such an enabling and empowering technology that has value now. You can set up email and websites 100%. Now today. When you want to set up geolocation spacing, there's location records in DNS, man. You can put longitude, latitude, altitude into DNS records. You can put signatures and signing and identity in a trusted, secure chain inside of DNS. It's all there. We're just tapping the surface, man.
I know. It's so exciting. I had an amazing conversation with a woman named Pippa Malmgren. Her father is one of the most famous economists living, and she's a quite accomplished economist herself. And she has a drone company that is it's an industrial drone company, and I don't even want to really get into what it is because I'll mess it up and do her an injustice. But one of the things that we were talking about is, and we were just talking casually, nothing about business, it wasn't a business conversation. But we were talking about what we're doing, and I was talking about exactly this, that I think the utility of a domain name is, we haven't even we've barely scratched the surface. It's like we've only taken the low-hanging fruit. And she was telling me about what she's doing with these drones. And it's like, okay, you've got a remote mine in Africa, but your headquarters is in Virginia. And you want to know in real time what's going on, on the physical property of that mine. And funny enough, what they call that is digital assets. The digital assets are, the visibility into a particular, square meter of a agricultural field or a mine or, whatever it might be. And that can take many shapes for different things. Okay. But what was so interesting is when we started talking about how these control mechanisms work. And if you're sitting in Virginia and you're controlling a drone in I don't know, Angola, then obviously that data, that control is passing through the internet. And then ultimately, a domain name could be assigned to that drone, and that domain name could be assigned to that square meter or that field. And then it can be given coordinates, longitude, latitude, and depth. And then it's like you just send a drone there.
Yeah.
And as we automate the whole world into robots and drones and all of this, isn't that pretty obvious? That's what we're going to do, right? Like it seems like that's the most elegant solution. That sort of should be the most obvious solution.
Drew, I haven't even gone into messaging or IoT and some of the other, innovation realms that are possible with domains. I got to tell you, the other thing that I love about domains is, that it's given me the privilege of being able to do what I love and feed my family, and,
Mm-hmm.
I'll get into innovating and I'll start registering a group of domains that I have, I set it aside for a project I'm going to do. And where else can you buy tools for your pegboard that somebody comes off the street and offers you 10x or 40x or 1000x for that tool that you bought on your pegboard?
Yep.
I think it's just really cool that people recognize the benefit of the right domain or multiple domains, and that they hold value like they do, and that many accrue in value. If you pick well,
yes.
They accrue in value, or you build the value. And I'm
and
excited about domains, though. I think I'm preaching to the choir here, obviously, but
yeah, you're definitely preaching to the converted. I don't anybody who's been a regular viewer, or even if you've seen one episode of this show, I think there's 100% consensus that I've got a lot of enthusiasm around the future of domain names. And it's always exciting to find, a kindred spirit who sees that same future, or is
cool.
excited, even if they see a different future. So is as excited about where we're going. Where else do we need to go? What else do we need to touch on here?
Well,
This has been such an exciting conversation.
Here's
I feel
the
like
thing.
I could just go for hours.
I have been up for hours. I pushed through in order to do the ICANN meeting, which is on Hamburg time, which, so I'm coming at you heavily caffeinated and really exhausted.
Let's do your ratio of time to explain a domain versus
Beautiful.
its value.
Yeah.
Yes?
Just to intro this, I was on this domain social after the NamesCon virtual, and Jothan was talking about this formula that he had created. Very simple visualization of one of the ways of demonstrating whether your domain is valuable or not. And I appreciate this so much because every day I have to explain to people. They send me a domain and they say, here's this domain I've got, had it 20 years. Here's a 7-page PDF explaining why it's valuable.
Isn't that aggravating? Look, I love hearing all about all of these ideas, but after you've been doing this for a while, you really end up hearing the same story over and over, and people are super excited about, their domain. They're very passionate about it. You get to hear the life story about, I was having a Chianti this afternoon, and The
And
C
it's
was
not just for the investors. This is also great for all the corporate buyers, startups, et cetera, who don't understand domain name values and aren't going to get into, say, the Rosner equation. So I have this your PowerPoint pulled up. Jothan Frakes, domain name gut check, simple and clinical ways to gauge a domain name's value.
Yeah, so just hit F5 on this sucker, man, and let's race.
Yeah, all right. Value is subjective, but real.
Totally.
You want to read through these points, or you want me to?
No, I'll explain it. People can read. So essentially, domains are very valuable, but I think that it depends on who the registrant is and what their purpose is for the name, and then who the audience is. Who's that potential buyer? What do they want to do? Then
high is the best use case.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And Jothan, just so you know, a lot of our audience just listens, isn't reading. So as you're going,
they aren't. Okay, so on this slide, I say, so the value is totally subjective but real. The domain's sale price ultimately is whatever a buyer is going to pay for it, right? And the value of that domain is always higher than the amount paid. They want to feel they got some extra value out of it. And or perceive that they can take and turn that into more. And domains, they absolutely will provide a lasting value as some kind of presence and profile, especially those where somebody's paying a little bit more for it because it's that much more important.
Yep, exactly.
So the gut check, the quick pass that I talk about is that the value of a domain name is inversely proportionate to the amount of time that it takes to explain that value to someone. So it's how long before 100%. That person is like, aha, I get it.
Genius.
So I call it the TTS, the time to splain. And I'm using the I Love Lucy, Ricky Ricardo. You got some splaining to do. So how long does it take? And there's this
great graph chart you've created that's a giant, starts off super high.
Inverse hockey stick.
Yeah, it's your classic long tail diagram, right?
Yeah.
You start off really peaked and then it just stretches out. Yep. So how much time does it take and how many words does it take? I mean, the best, most valuable domain is one where no words need be spoken. The person sees the domain, they see the price, they immediately leap on it. That is the best. When you get handed, 2 bullet points, okay, it makes sense to me. The ones you don't have to have any explanation as a buyer or somebody seeking a name, that's the one that's really valuable. If you have to receive a dissertation, that is like 50 pages long, that goes into the whole business plan, not everybody's gonna, you just aren't into it.
And that translates into your marketing spend, because
Absolutely.
That's where you're splaining. Your every word you need to say costs you money. Like, we know that from, billboards, radio ads, anything. Every single word you say, every moment it takes you to explain, it costs you money, it costs you conversions, it costs you memory. People can't remember it. If, out here, we have this god-awful air conditioning company from the 1950s, and it's called Gettle. And their little jingle is GOETTL, hard to, good, I don't know, good for your air conditioner or something, but hard to spell. Like, really? And they spend so much money. I mean, that is on the radio all day, every day, on every billboard.
Test the radio test too. The radio test, it sounded like you said ghetto.
Yeah.
There you have it.
I mean, I'm not trying to bag on that company, but it's probably somebody's surname, probably a highly respected person, and so I don't want to mess with it. But yeah, you need that jingle or something to help somebody get that aha.
Brand versus what does it cost for the continued marketing? And this isn't just for, now, first of all, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. Air conditioning companies are making money, but air conditioning companies aside, whatever your business is, whether you have an established brand that already has some equity built into it, or you're starting from scratch, you're looking at, I want to see, Jothan, you create another curve of good domain versus amount of money you need to spend on marketing.
Oh, you know, I
just
think it would be the same graph, honestly.
Yeah,
Right?
same.
Well, actually, I mean, the horizontal axis would be how much you have to spend, and the vertical
Exactly.
axis would be,
It'd just
you know,
be this the
maybe,
other way. Yep.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but domains are just, you know, the right domain can quickly make sense. And really, again, I say it's subjective, right? Because sometimes somebody will immediately see the value in it. And it's important, you know, if you're a person who holds a name and somebody would like a name, to be able to succinctly just say, you know, here's the name, here's what I got it for. They may have a whole different idea,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, but I just love domains because there is this value to them. They do seem to hold some value, and
Just like land, right? I mean, that's the way that I look at it. It's like, you know, there's this world out there. We operate in it. We build stores. We build homes. We do things. We've got social things like sports. We've got all these different ways that we do, you know, use this land, but there's only so much land.
Yep.
And so, you know, you want to have a little piece of it because someday you might need it. And, you know, I kind of look at the internet like that. Like, you know, the internet is obviously far more vast. But I think going beyond some of the intuitive namespace, you know, then it's like, all right, well, let's go set up a farm on the moon or on Mars, right? It's like, all right, well, we ran out of space on Earth. And all you're doing is, it doesn't mean that's not viable, but you're just increasing the friction. You're increasing the distance between you and your consumer.
And this is the turning point. Like, this has been the Wild West, and now we're at a new moment. Jothan, I think as we wrap up too, I just think you were born for domains. I think for all the people who struggle to remember your name, or more than what your name is, how to pronounce it.
Sure.
I think, so your name comes from your parents couldn't agree on Jonathan and Ethan?
Yeah, it's a mashup. It's a mashup between, well, it's Joshua and Ethan. And
Joshua and Ethan.
I named
the hack,
my first
the original hack.
Yep. Yeah. It's a mashup, right? Early mashup.
I just think you were born to do this.
Well, I named my son as a reverse tribute to my parents. I named my son Joshua Ethan, right? To like, you know, reverse tribute to the parents.
You're such a sweet human being.
Thank you
for taking the time.
I want to ask you one more question before we go. Subjective.
Sure. Okay.
Looking at that graph, and which I wholeheartedly agree with the print. I mean, it's hard not to, right? It's obvious. That is the value proposition. Give me an order of magnitude valuation on the domain name that is at the absolute, you know, up and to the left of that graph. If it takes you 0 seconds to say, aha, if you tell me your domain name and I say, aha, and it's a commercially viable aha, give me an order of magnitude.
Single word generic comms. Single word generic comms.
Yeah, single word generic comms. Clearly, that's what we're talking about here. Short, probably 3 or 4 letters. But before you answer the question, I just want to preface it with this. We're not necessarily talking about what is the price it trades in today's market, because earlier you mentioned that your valuations are generally dictated at, but you're going to put this in an auction today, what's the reserve price it sells at, okay? At or above. That's not what I'm asking you. What I'm asking you is, given the fact that you and I both agree that we've only scratched the surface on the utility of these domain names, and once it sells, it is, as I say, off the market forever. What is the value? What is the actual value? What is the fully attributed value of at least of what we believe, you believe, the full utility of the domain is or will be a decade from now? Which decade is a very reasonable business multiple to think in, okay? What is that fully attributed value of the 3 or 4 letter bang on .com instant aha? Order of magnitude.
You mean versus what you registered it for? Or
unhinged overall? From today's prices, unhinged from cost, all of that aside, just if we say voice.com sold for $30 million, that's probably just a half a degree to the right of what I'm talking about in terms of, you know, 4-letter word. I just think 4-letter words just are the gold standard. But you take a 4-letter word, absolute bang on, like a ring.com, for example. Ignore that there's a business. You know, but
well, so there's a guy by the name of Rick Schwartz, who I respect tremendously. And I think he says it the best. I always agree with what he says. I don't like the way he says it. Sometimes his delivery is sometimes,
abrasive.
Can be, but he's actually been so prescient about things. 10 years from now, let's say there was a replacement technology for domains today. You still aren't going to see domains go away in 10 years. I still see fax numbers on business cards, right? That's a technology that went away, how long ago? I don't see physical addresses leaving business cards maybe sooner than domains do. And if you've got an established domain, you're going to keep building it and growing it. If you've got a business that is completely tied to that left end pinnacle name, let's call it the premium of the premiums, it's going to go up at least 100 times value. I think it's easily going to go up 100 times value. Now,
I'm less concerned with the appreciation. What I'm asking is an actual order of magnitude number. Let's say home.com. In my eyes, of commercially viable domains, home.com in my eyes is the most valuable domain. It does a top 3 in the world. Art.com actually might be up there as number 1 for me. But if we're talking about top 5 domains in the world, it's going to be subjective. But you take a home.com, ignore what it would sell for today. I don't care about how much appreciation we're talking about. What is that actually worth? It completely derailed from pricing in the market today. What do you think is the value capture of a name like that a decade from now? The commercial capture. Is it 100 million? Is it $1 billion? Is it $10 billion?
I think we get a little astray. Sure, Drew. We get a little astray with some of these, like price valuations, because sometimes there's a company tied to, what's getting bought and what's built on that domain name. And so I think that's going to have a very heavy impact on that. Like, what is Amazon.com worth, right? And what is it? What was it worth 10 years ago?
No, hold on. I'm asking a different question.
I understand what you're asking.
But I'm asking a different question. I'm asking about home.com, which, for example, has no business, but it has every single person on earth can easily find multiple commercialization use cases of that name, all of them being very large, from home services to real estate to home development and building, you name it, right? Senior care. I mean, you're talking endless amounts of massive utility.
Drew, if I had these answers, I'd be a wealthy man. I'd be like Drew Rosner wealthy. I would be like, that's why I'm so behind the scenes, man. Like, if I could call that in 1995, I would not have registered Jothan.com.
Right. This is like asking you, do you believe in aliens? That's all. That's what I'm asking. I'm asking you, do you believe in aliens?
I believe it'll go up.
Are we talking about 100 million? Are we talking about 1 billion? What's the order of magnitude that we're talking about in terms of value capture from one of these, ultra tier names?
I mean,
yeah, that's it.
Make me guesstimate. I mean, well, I think if you're talking about home.com specifically, I could see let's use that as an archetype, but this is like the voice.com type of sale. Like 10 years from now, what we'll be talking about as the apex predator name sale, right? I could easily see, I don't think $1 billion, but I think we could see something in the $100 million range.
Yeah.
For a domain of that quality, of that caliber. We saw the new TLDs come out, and I think, you talk about planting trees. I talk about them as young athletes, right? I mean, Com is Michael Jordan right now. And, these new TLDs, many of them are still, in the little leagues. They're still in their youth, though. And we don't get the chance to see what they'll manifest into until, a decade later. So we don't know what we don't know about what those will be. I still don't see anything unseating Com too quickly. It's possible, but unlikely.
Not likely. Yeah.
And so one thing that I saw happen, I've not ever deferred from the topic of com is king. People try new TLDs, and we did this with my conference with merge.show. We also got mergeshow.com. People will still revert to putting a com on things. People may not try new technologies, and they may, my kids, when they were little, they used to love to run their edges of their blanket, the soft edge of their blanket, because it would help them if they felt uncomfortable or anxious. And people like to run their hands along that soothing, soft edge of their .com domain name. They're afraid of change. They want that comfort of the known and the peaceful feeling. So I think com will continue to hold its value. I think we could see stuff in the 100 million range. Billion challenges me to say that that'll happen. But it could happen. I guess it could happen.
I think it does. I think we see it in abilities. I think you look at cars.com, had a balance sheet, valuation of 800 and something, 900 million. I don't think that's unfair. Obviously a lot of that value creation comes from the business, right? But what it demonstrates is, if you take the cars.com business and you move it to buycars.com, is it the same business? Does it have the same value? No. So the difference between the value of the company on buycars.com and cars.com, the difference in those two market caps is the value of that domain.
Well, and the spectrum of what it could be. I'll leave you with this one thing. You know how I talked to you about that curve and how quickly somebody sees, that value. And I talked about digitalization and how people are getting excited about stuff. People get excited about a name immediately. When they get really, really excited is when they're in the middle of learning about what they can do with a domain name. And some of the most interesting conversations I've had is where I'm showing people Zapier automation, or how to just set something up in WordPress, how to establish hosting on AWS or Azure or Google Cloud. When you've got somebody who's into developing and the light bulb starts to come on, it's like they're like, oh my goodness, I can do all of these things with a domain name. I'm super excited about it. There's that activation moment. And I think that building it, they see how they're going to build the value of that domain name and how it's going to become more, it's going to accrue value.
I just like seeing my face and Drew's face as you're saying that. Our smile is as big as seeing a brand new baby. I mean, just the excitement and the newness that is still yet to come.
Well, we all believe this, and I think people are starting to catch wind of it. Like it's because domains are coming out of the plumbing. Hopefully we'll be seeing people, using domains as an asset class, a whole asset class on its own. I think we'll get there, and that's where your hundreds of millions of dollars domain is. That's the Apple stock.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Jothan, not only for joining us, but 8 hours with ICANN. Everything you do for the industry is phenomenal. I hope you will be a regular on this show. I so appreciate you.
Oh, thank you, Tess. Thanks. This is a really important show. DomainSherpa is a real staple. So many people learn so much and get so much from Drew. Tess, thank you for keeping it going. It's really a treat.
All right. We'll see you next time then. Bye.
Thanks, brother.